Hey Jake, how have you
Hey,
been?
Mike. Good. How are you doing?
I can't complain. It's been beautiful weather and I got the rest of the week off, so
Oh,
it's
nice.
great for me.
Good for you. Good for you.
What have you been up to?
Oh, I've been in the woods a lot. Um, I decided to make a bit of content and create a YouTube channel, and so I've been out getting content for that all summer, and about halfway through the summer now, and I've had a few fun adventures that I I made videos of, and right now I'm just learning how to edit and chop it up to make it look presentable, but yeah, I think it'll be enjoyable. Had some pretty hairy moments out there.
That's probably the hardest part. It's always, well, I say that, but filming it can be pretty difficult too. But
Yeah,
editing it is always the hardest part.
yeah, exactly. Sure.
Uh, CapCut. CapCut's what I use for mine, and it works pretty well. You got
Yeah.
all kinds of different things, and I just use the free version of it. So, and you still
Right.
get all kinds of different things off of it. But I can't wait to see it. I can't wait. Whenever we get off of here, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm subscribed so that I can uh, check out your videos. Have you posted one yet?
No, I haven't posted one yet. I wanted to wait until my extraction before I posted anything.
I
Um,
got you.
because there's going to be quite a bit of commentary with them too, and I want to talk about the experience um, and the extraction. And I've had a lot of questions people have sent to me, and I kind of plan on going over all of that. And rather than start at the beginning with episode one and do a recap like most people do, I just kind of want to talk about the whole experience as a blanket.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, I can't wait to see it. And I'll put a link to your YouTube uh, in the video description as well.
Okay,
That way
sounds
everybody else can find it.
yeah, sounds great.
Uh, let's go ahead and get into your experience here. So starting out, uh, what made you want to apply for the show? What was your thought process when you applied?
Well, I started watching the show with season one. I had seen it advertised, and I thought, wow, this has got some potential. The idea of it, and back then it was more like I think that the mission of it was to kind of pluck people out of society and throw them out there and see how they do. What's it like
Yeah,
with everyday Joe out there? And most people had some survival experience. You don't want to take somebody that is completely unfamiliar with it and throw them in an environment like that. But I think in the beginning, coming across people who actually lived it, as a major part of their lifestyle. I think that was probably something that they had to work into a little bit, um, but yeah, as you could see from the contestants, it attracted that kind of person from the get go. And as time went on, as more survivalists learned about it, it became a lot more competitive, I think, to get on the show. But I really enjoyed watching it go through, I wouldn't say growing pains, but just its development and what it turned into. I think it probably took a few seasons to really fall into its stride, but once it did, it became evident to me that that was something that I would really like to take part in. The only thing that was holding me back from applying earlier was the age of my kids because they were just little guys, and um, I'd been through a divorce about 6 years ago, and so I thought it was pretty important for me to not leave them in those critical development ages, um, and so I just
yeah,
waited until the time was right. And once they got older, up into their teen years, I thought, okay, I'm going to do it, and sent in my application. And to my surprise, I got a call back, and
that's awesome.
yeah, it was pretty surreal.
Yeah, you was talking about the competition for these 10 spots. There's like 80,000 people that
Yeah,
apply.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, in fact, I think this last one, season 11. I mean, I think it was Quinn that said that it was that they had like 100,000 emails in their inbox at the time.
Wow.
So
That's
yeah,
insane.
I still can't believe that I was lucky enough to have my email opened up, just
Yeah.
somebody even look at it, let alone go through the entire process.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's baffling, really, if you think about that staggering number that came down to 10 people,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know. Yeah.
And, throw on top of that, I've had no exposure. I've never had any kind of YouTube channel that showcased this, or, social media. I was pretty much a ghost on. And yeah, I mean, it was like winning the lottery for me.
Yeah. See, I was in the same little spot there. I had a Facebook when I was younger, never used it,
Mhm.
didn't have YouTube then. I didn't have any of this stuff until after the show. And so I was in the same boat. I was just lucky that they opened mine up and said, well, let's give him a shot.
Right.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome though.
It was really funny too, with each step. I mean, there are a lot of steps. First, it's just an email for a phone call.
Yeah.
You have a phone call, that's another step. And then a Zoom meeting, that's another step. And it's like they're eliminating people along the way. With each one of these steps, they're cutting people out. And I thought with each one, I was like, well, that's probably it, but pretty cool that I got that far.
Yeah. But it's insane because I know that I say I know, but I don't think that they could possibly call 100,000 people and have a conversation with them and reduce those. So there was a reduction before that even started, you
Exactly.
know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you say,
And the funny thing about that, Mikey, is that, I mean, I can remember filling out a little biography and the application like it was yesterday. And I didn't look at it a second time. I didn't edit anything. I just sat down, wrote it out, shot it over there, and that was it. I closed the computer and I was like, all right, we'll see what happens. I didn't even wring my hands over it or anything. It was just shot it off and that was it. So
that's awesome, man. It's just it amazes me when you say 100,000 people. I can't get over that. 100,000 people down to 10 people. That's a very small percent.
yeah.
Uh, man. Uh, After you applied and they got back to you and everything, I know that you have to do your casting videos and stuff like that. After all of that, and they told you that you were going to be on the show, did you make any kind of special preparations to go on the show?
Yeah, I sure did. Being in a divorce situation, I actually had to make some legal arrangements for me to be able
Oh,
to go. So my kids stayed with their mom while I was gone, and we have shared visitation. But in order for me to do this without any kind of legal problems, of course, I had to go through
yeah,
court to get
yeah.
that. And that when I ran it by the judge, he was like, well, yeah, you can do this. So it was really no problem. It was pretty straightforward.
Nice. Had the judge heard of the show?
Yes, yeah, he was
Yeah,
a mhm.
yeah. Probably a big fan.
Yeah, I suspect he probably is.
That's awesome. I didn't think about stuff like that. Legal situations that have to be sorted out. Most people say, yeah, I put on X amount of weight, or like Dusty. Dusty said I had to cut a bunch of firewood for the winter, because they burn wood. But I didn't think about any kind of like legal situations that somebody would be in. So that's a mind opener for me.
Yeah, and that, I always knew if I was going to do this that would be a hurdle that I had to cross. But um that was just one more thing, one more thing in the preparation process. And
Yeah.
of course, I put on as much weight as I could, and it shows. But um, I think I think those two things were probably the biggest, the biggest tasks on my mind in preparation after I'd gotten the call that, yeah, we can do this.
Yeah.
So, and I in fact had arranged the hearing for that before I got the call, because there was a very small window of time
Yeah.
from going. So I just did that uh, as kind of a just in case type of a thing, and it
Yeah.
worked out.
Seems like, yeah, it seems to me like, I mean, you don't seem like the, uh, excuse my language, butthole kind of person. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure that you had, there was discussions before it even went to a courtroom. And so there was agreements made and stuff like that. So
It was,
it.
I actually had to kind of keep it under my hat.
Oh, really?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's my divorce is one of those situations where you don't want to give away too much information. You know what I mean?
Okay. I understand. Yeah, I
Unfortunately.
understand. Well, it just, like I said, it opened my eyes to, I never thought about that side of someone's story,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of people out there that have shared custody and stuff like that. And for people to do this, there have to be arrangements made.
Right.
Yeah. So that's just food for thought there. That's something else.
Yeah. So
Uh,
anybody in my situation, don't let it hold you back. There's always a way.
that's exactly right. There's always a way. Don't just follow your dreams, make it happen.
Yep. As
Yeah,
long as it's good for your family, do it.
that's exactly right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Uh, after all the preparations were made, you got the call. You're on the show now. They've told you that you're going. Um, well, not even that you're going. You had to go through your boot camp, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
what was the boot camp like for you?
Oh, it was,
Everybody's got a little different story. I just like to hear their
yeah,
stories about it.
sure. Boot camp was really cool. It was a very fun experience. Since COVID, they started doing boot camp online and through Zoom meetings. And
Yeah.
so every day we would meet for, I think it was like 8 or 9 hours a day, and all 20 of us are there. And we're just looking at each other in our little bubbles on the screen. It was a lot different than what it used to be back in the day, where they'd fly you out to New York or Connecticut or wherever they were doing it and have an in-person boot camp. And I think that presented a few challenges that, not being there in person to see somebody work. So you had to kind of showcase yourself in a different way than you would in person. Um, in boot camp, you want yourself to stand out, but you don't want yourself to stand out in the wrong way. Right.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted myself to stand out as who I am. I didn't want to be over the top, or try to be showboating or anything like that, but just present myself in the way that I am, um and go from there. Because I think that if an applicant tries to fake something, they're going to be found out, and very fast. Like, these guys are so good at sniffing out fakery
Yes.
that, yeah, it's your best bet of getting on the show is to be completely honest, no matter what you are or what it is.
Yep.
And, don't try and make yourself look like something you're not. Just be yourself.
Yep. And these guys know what they're talking about. They
Yeah.
they know what they're doing, and that's people that send in the videos. They want to see you make a fire. They probably know more about making that fire than you do.
Hmm.
You know, but at the same time, if you're genuine, if you're honest, and you're just being yourself, that's what they want to see. They want to see a person, not who you think you want to be, but who you are.
Yep.
I like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So after boot camp, um, they flew you out to base camp, the orientation.
Yeah, and that's where
What?
we really got to size each other up. You know, when you're in boot camp, you're looking at 20 people and you're trying to remember everybody's name and who they are and what they say about themselves, but you don't ever get to see them do anything, right?
Yeah,
Because that's all done kind of a one-on-one in private videos where you're building a fire or demonstrating some kind of bushcraft skill. You know, the other people were not seeing any of that. So when I got to base camp, it was like, okay, here's everybody. You know, who's going to go the distance here? Who am I going to be at the end with? You know, that kind of thing.
yeah.
And I know you experienced the same thing. Knowing
Oh
you,
yeah.
I know you were thinking about that. So, but you know, I think everybody does that. And um, yeah, I loved it. You know, I really liked getting to know everybody at base camp. And one of the things about our group, I mean, you probably think the exact same thing about your group of folks that went out there, but everybody that I went out there with is just an awesome human being. And
Yeah.
we bonded, we created friendships. There's no rivalry, there's no, you know, hard feelings or backbiting or anything like that. Like we're just rooting each other on and very happy for everybody and the accomplishments that they had out there. It's been a pretty amazing experience.
It's crazy because you said you bonded with these people. Usually when you find a friend in everyday life, you know, when you meet them, you're like, yeah, I like you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then a friendship builds over the course of months or years, you know, and
Yeah,
to a trusting friendship
right.
with these people, with these groups of people. Those friendships form and climax and have trust and everything else within about 2 weeks.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's it's really amazing that
It
it
is.
happens that fast and
And
it,
you
it
know,
stays for life.
it does. And you know, the thing about it too is that it continues on while you're in the field because you're
Yeah,
sharing the experience. Even though you're completely alone, you're sharing that experience with them. They're all going through the same stuff you are. And it's like at the end of it, you're giving each other hugs and crying and talking
yeah,
about everything. And it's like you went through war with these people.
yeah. I remember White Black from my season. You know White.
Oh yeah.
Everybody knows White. You know,
Right.
he told me after he came out. I was there when he came out, and he told me uh, that on day 50 he stopped what he was doing for a minute and he looked at the camera and he said, Mikey, if I knew it was just me and you out here, I'd quit today.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing, man, for a person going through this to just to even think that, much less say it. You
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
tear up every time I start thinking about it. That's a true friendship right there.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
over the course of just a few weeks of knowing each other.
Yep. Exactly.
You know, nobody nobody gets to experience what you get to experience
Yeah.
on this show.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's a lot of, you know, people that are not that familiar with the show. They always come in kind of skeptical. Is it real? Are they really alone? You know, all the questions. And boy, I got to tell you, it is all of that and then some.
yeah,
And I wish that everybody could get a close up, candid view of what actually happens out there. You
yeah,
get to experience maybe a half hour to an hour of everybody's experience that took place over weeks or months.
yeah,
And yeah, there's just so much more that happens than you get to see.
yeah. There really is. That's before you guys, but whenever you first said that, hey, I'm Jake and I'm going to be on Alone season 11, when I first started seeing those come out on Facebook and stuff, I actually ran out here to my shop and I did a video and I broke down the math for you guys. I just wanted you guys to know ahead of time that the time spent on a loan and versus the time viewed on a loan
Right.
is, I mean, there's such a small percent of what people actually get to see that you did,
Yeah.
you know, and even the time frame, it's kind of the time on a loan is kind of warped on the show.
Yes.
They may show some things that happen here, but it actually happened here,
Right.
but that's how it follows,
Yep.
But yeah, it's such a, I think I did. I focused on my time because I didn't know everybody else's, and it'd be hard to do it as a collective.
Yeah.
But I think when I broke down the math on my time, it was like 0.48%
Yeah.
of the time that I spent there. That's insane. Very little.
Right. But to their credit, the amount that they're able to tell in those short edits is pretty amazing, and that's because they comb over everything, and
Yep.
then I think what's going through their heads when they look at this is like, okay, there's this life that this person was living out there. What part of the story are we going to tell?
Yeah.
And then they create that story arc. And
Well, at the same time, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but at the same time, I think that you have a story when you first go there.
mhm,
They're talking to you. That, I mean, it starts from when you filled out your application. You have a story.
mhm,
Sometimes when you get there, that story changes a little bit,
mhm,
you know, and that story begins to develop, and that's the story that you actually take out there with you.
right.
That's the one that they find.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really cool. It's a very, very cool process. And, in some ways, watching, knowing everything that happened out there and wondering what's going to be shown of what you did, and then sitting down and watching it and remembering everything, right?
Yeah.
You're a spectator of it too. In some ways, you're kind of like, oh wow, what's going to happen next?
Oh, I remember whenever the season first started, I was like, man, I hope they show this. I
Yeah.
hope they show this.
Yeah. And
So
inevitably, you're not going to see the things that you were hoping to see, but
yeah,
it was all you. It's all you out there, and
yeah,
so everything that you're watching is something you did.
yeah. It's crazy too, seeing it from the other view, ain't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
See, watching yourself, because when you're out there, you're looking at a camera or you're looking at what you're doing. You see yourself in the first person, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're watching yourself from this different angle. It's
Yeah,
it's
and you're
kind of
saying,
it's
"Oh man, what a
surreal.
goober!" Like,
Oh
go
God,
back
I
and
know.
get your gloves, Jake. Come on, you're streaming TV,
Everybody becomes the armchair survivalist at some point in time,
Right.
even if it's to yourself. I love that. I tell people all the time, they start talking about stuff that I've done or whatever, and I'll say, well, I wouldn't do that if I was on that show.
And then you go out there and do it.
Yeah. Oh God.
That's
Uh, let's jump to after orientation went through. What was your favorite part of orientation? I gotta ask. What was your favorite part of orientation?
Boy, that's a good question. My favorite part of orientation was when we had downtime in between meetings, and all of us got to mingle together and talk and build friendships. And in our boot camp, that all took place at the or base camp. It took place at the archery range that we had set up out there, and so we were all out there lined up with our bows and shooting 3D targets and
Nice.
ribbing each other for our bad shots, and it was fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's so great. Uh, I'm glad to hear everybody's got I love seeing these different point of views. Everybody's got their own favorite parts, you know. And I think that was the Cubby might have said that he enjoyed the archery too, but I think that was the most detailed one I've heard so far.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then
So
I'd also add too, close second to that was getting to know the people in production, because
oh
they're
yeah,
phenomenal people. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was not what I expected at all. Just
you
down to
expect them to
earth.
be producers?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And I mean, these guys are out there with us in the rain and uh,
yeah,
enjoying it. And I mean, they come from an environment that's very different from myself, right?
yeah,
But they're out there at home in it, and they're tough and just like really friendly, just very,
yeah.
very open and friendly,
Down to earth.
down to earth. Yeah, they've got your best interest in mind.
Yeah,
It's just a really great experience all the way around.
yeah. You see some guy walking through there, and he's got on shorts and he's not wearing any tennis shoes, and you're like, who's that? It's like, oh, that's so and so. He's a producer, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So let's go to drop day. Um, what place were you dropped in? Not your site, but like first, second, third.
Oh shoot. I think I was about seventh.
Oh, so it was later.
Yeah, it was later. I watched quite a few people take off. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
So
I think it was either sixth or seventh.
yeah, I know that you at that point in time you've already been cut off from everything.
Mhm.
So you have no idea what time would you say about what time do you think it was when you were dropped?
I think it was probably somewhere around, I want to say around 1 o'clock, 1 to 2
Okay.
o'clock. Yeah. And they took me up in the helicopter, and I had done drops before. This wasn't my first rodeo, so to speak. So I didn't have any kind of apprehension about helicopter rides or anything like that. I actually grew up in a piloting family, so
That's
um,
awesome.
and then I've had quite a few uh, experiences in Alaska in the bush, being dropped up there, um, off runway stuff, and so flying in, I didn't experience drop shock. That's something that I've already been through as far as knowing what to expect. Um, I think the first time that I was ever dropped off in the bush, there was a feeling of smallness. Like you look around and there's nothing else around you, and you just get this overwhelming sense of um, insignificance. Like you're completely at the mercy of nature, and you don't know what's hiding in the bushes because you didn't walk to your spot. You just got dropped
Yeah.
right there where you're at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of disorientation, but you explore around and get your feet and figure out what your area looks like and go from there. Not a
Yeah.
not so I didn't get to experience all of that, but as far as shock goes. But I did have a lot of fun when we flew out. It was kind of like getting a little tour of the area, and that in itself was a little disorienting because it wasn't just like a straight line to my area and then dropped. It was like put a blindfold on, spin you in circles, and then
Yeah.
throw you in the bushes, kind of a thing. So I had no idea where I was, but yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. No, whenever they dropped me, I went on a boat,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of the same. It's not that they, because I'm sure a lot of people probably think, well, while you're on your way down there, you could probably get a good view of the land. No, this is they take you around the whole block. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
They make sure that you have no idea what you're looking at, and then all of a sudden they stop and they're like, "Okay, here you
Hmm.
go."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's no sneak peeks or anything like that beforehand. I'm sure in a helicopter, as you were coming down, you kind of got to look around a little bit, but even then, you're not seeing a whole lot.
Exactly, because it looks different on the ground than in the air.
Yeah,
And so there's nothing that you might see a lake, and say, okay,
yeah,
that's that lake I saw. That's a lot of good info right there.
yeah. That's now I know that direction has water at least.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Uh, so when you first put your boots on the ground, and the helicopter took off, what was going through your mind? Were you setting priorities or?
Well, not initially. So there's this thing that I do when I'm dropped off by an airplane or a helicopter, and I was hoping that this would part of it would show. I didn't get all of it, but I did talk to the camera about this when I was dropped out there. When you hear the last sounds of the helicopter or the boat or the airplane disappearing in the distance, there's absolute silence out there. It's like the forest or tundra just shuts off because of the noise. All the animals go dead silent. There's no birds or anything. And there's, I'd say, probably a minute to 2 minutes where you experience that complete silence. And I like to just sit in that silence and
Wow.
and then listen to things start to wake up again. And pretty soon you start hearing birds, you start hearing ravens talking to each other, and ducks on the lake, and jays in the woods. It's those things just start coming back to life and going about their day again. And that I like to capture that moment. And so I made it a point to do that again while I was out there. And it just, the feelings of, I guess, it was very surreal, to go through it again. But in that situation where I was actually there, like I'd gone through the whole process and I was actually there and it was real. It wasn't just something that I was dreaming about or hoping for, but I had actually made it come to fruition.
That's awesome. I didn't pay attention to that, man. And now that you say that, I really wish I would have. Because whenever I was dropped, I was like, okay, I don't have time for this. I'm gonna get straight on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I would have loved to experience that moment of complete silence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to
Well,
the next generation of balloon contestants, take
yeah.
that moment,
Yeah.
that moment of complete silence.
And our journeys aren't over either. We're going to spend the next half of our life exploring the wilderness and whatever opportunities we get. And so,
Yeah.
hopefully you and I and anybody else who gets to experience that kind of thing will take that moment and recognize it, because it's a pretty special moment, I think, when you get to see life wake up after the noise is
Yeah.
gone.
It's like the real nature, not the hustle and bustle. Once the hustle and bustle's gone, it's the real nature. That's awesome. Wow, that's some deep stuff right there. I gotta climb out of that. I'm starting to think about it. uh, so whenever you first got there, after the moment of silence was over, did you start prioritizing then? Did you start moving around, looking for different things, exploring? Uh,
Yeah.
I know at some point in time, you lost your fishing line.
Right.
Uh, when do you think you lost your fishing line?
Okay. Yeah. So I know within the half hour or hour of when it happened. But yeah, after that moment, and I was like, okay, time to get to work, and I made my way up through the alders along that river that I was on. It's just choked with alders. You could see from Cubby's video that he made when he got stabbed in the leg, right? How thick those alders are. And that's how the entire river system is there. Along the river, you've got about, I'd say, 100 feet back from the river is just choked with alders and willows. And so you kind of have to bushwhack through that to get to a place where you can move freely. There aren't game trails really going through those alders. There's the bears can move through it pretty easily, but those are bears. And when you're
Yeah.
carrying equipment, you've got backpacks on and stuff like that. I mean, you're a mess walking around through that stuff. And so, what I did was I moved away from the riverbank up to a higher point and set my pack down and just kind of got my bearings of where I was. Luckily, in my area, I had a high point. In fact, the nickname for my area was High Rock when
Nice.
when we picked our areas. And so I climbed up to the top of that rock to get my bearings and see where the river went and um, any other land features that I could use. And from up on that point, from where I had dropped my pack there, it was clear that I was going to have to do some exploration to find a suitable place for a shelter, just a temporary shelter. There wasn't a piece of even ground on my entire place. It was just very rocky and hilly and full of brush. So yeah, I wanted to find a place that I could kind of set up a temporary camp, and I threw my pack back on and headed out into the alders and made it to one end of my area. And they didn't include this in the show, but I think I can talk about this. I mean, everybody knows that we carry around a yellow brick, and everybody knows
Yeah.
that we have a designated area and we can't leave it.
Yeah.
So I got to the edge. Well, I didn't know it was the edge of my area, but I found a spot and I was like, okay, this is going to work really well. It's nice and flat. I've got some features in the river here to fish, and it was looking pretty good. There was really good timber there for me to build a shelter. And so I put down my stuff and I start making videos and doing the whole thing. And my yellow brick goes off and says, "You're out of your area."
Oh,
So
wow.
here I am 2 hours after being dropped, and I've already wandered out of my zone. So
Wow.
I was kind of frustrated at that point. So I just threw my pack on. I don't know if people watching this know what a gorilla pod is, but it's a small tripod about that long that you can put a GoPro on. You have one
Yeah,
sitting.
I thought I did.
I've got one back here too somewhere.
Yeah, there's one somewhere in here, I promise you.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Bear with me.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a gorilla pod. Okay.
Yes.
So I stuck that in the side pocket of my pack, and it had the GoPro sitting on top of it. I don't have one mounted on there right now, but I just shoved that in the side pocket, and the side pocket has a zipper that goes up and down. Well, up is closed and down is open. And I had the legs of this sticking out of that about this far. Okay. And I was rushing myself. I wasn't in a thinking mode. I just threw it in there because I needed to get back through.
Frustrated.
Very frustrated. And so I started heading back to my drop spot, and yeah, I knew it was going to get dark soon. So I'm going through the alders, and it's just as bad going back as it was coming out. And I get back to my site. It took me probably an hour and a half maybe to get there, just because of how hard it was moving through it. And I took my pack off and started unpacking things, and I look at my pack, and that pocket is open. And there's no gorilla pod. There's no no GoPro in there. And I thought, oh,
Wow.
and so I open up the bag, and my immediate thought was, what else was in here? And that's when I figured out that, because I tore my pack apart, just making sure that I had my items, my 10 items. And the only one of my 10 items that was missing was my roll of fishing line. And that's when I had remembered I'd stuck it in that pocket before we had left. So
Man.
yeah, it was a gut punch for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. One of
Yep.
those, oh, I can't believe that happened moments.
Yeah, it was like, I cannot believe that this happened. So I spent the next couple of days looking for it, and I never found it, but I did find the GoPro.
Yeah. So there's no telling. It could have fell out after the GoPro.
It
There's
yeah,
no telling.
it fell out after. I mean, there's no way to track myself through there. It was just too thick. I
Uh,
had no idea where I'd been, but I tried to find it. I went everywhere I thought I'd been. And it's the thing about it is it's a black spool with transparent monofilament on it. And so that
yeah,
stuff falls into the moss. Good luck, finding
yeah. Lost in the brush. That's all.
the brush.
It's funny that you say that it's so thick that you had no idea where you were,
No,
where you had been.
where I'd been.
Yeah, I get a lot of grief about getting lost. I still get a lot of grief about getting lost on the show. And I was like, man, I'm down here in the red mud. I can track myself all the way back and tell you when I was there. Up there, I couldn't do nothing with that.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Well, and I knew
yeah,
the general path that I'd taken, right? Because I was going through the
yeah,
alders along the river, but yeah, there was just no way to find the trail that I had blazed.
yeah.
So
Uh, I got a kind of funny story. Losing your fishing line, don't get me wrong, losing your fishing line, that is not funny. That has to suck, you know.
looking back
But
on it, it's all right.
yeah, but I got a funny one for you. So when I was dropped, okay, I took my knife, my multi-tool out of my pack and I put it in my back pocket.
Mhm.
And I don't know what made me do it. I never put knives or anything in my back pocket. They're usually on a side pocket on my leg. But I put it in my back pocket. And so I'm kind of looking around, I'm exploring a little bit, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go build a fire or something. And I realized that I had no idea where my knife was.
Oh,
I was looking for it everywhere. I was thinking, oh my God, I have been all over this place already. I've spent the last 2 or 3 hours walking around in the woods. I'll never find my knife. And
mhm.
so I started itemizing. I was like, okay, uh, I've got a broadhead that I can use to clean animals. I've got, a scraper that I can use for my ferro rod. I've got this. I was trying to come up. I can do this. I can break my snare wire if I flex it good enough. So I was trying to come up with all these million different ways to not need that knife. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me. I was like, it's in my back pocket.
Right.
So I spent 45 minutes freaking out and it was in my back pocket. Oh God. Uh what else was it? You actually didn't bring a ferro rod, right?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So we saw you. Can you I'll let you explain it. Can you tell us about when we saw you build your first fire and the next fire mentality that you showed?
Yeah, yeah. So primitive fire is something I've been doing for decades, and I'm very comfortable with fire. In any given situation. I mean, it's in some situations it's a lot harder to make friction fire than in others. Um, but in a situation like this, where there's so much riding on it, any risks that you take have to be very calculated. I would not want to go into this area making friction fire all winter. That would be really tough. It you can take preparations to keep a fire going, and that makes life a lot easier, but you can't always keep it going. I mean, stuff happens, and if your fire goes out while you're asleep, or something happens, if you've got a container like the one that I made that you use for carrying fire, that's not what I used mine for. But if you're carrying fire, sometimes those can go out. You have to be able to make a fire at will, even if you're keeping a fire lit all the time. You still have to be able to
Yeah.
do that. So I gave it a lot of thought because I don't use ferro rods. Um, it's not because I think I'm better than ferro rods or anybody that uses them. It's just not my preferred way to make fire. There's a, not to get all, kind of woo woo on you, but there's a connection that you have with the past that I enjoy when you're using more primitive methods. Ferro rods, ferrocerium has only been around since I think like the 1920s or something like that. It's a very recent invention, and it wasn't even in wide
01.
use. What's that?
1901.
1901. Thank you. And
1901.
yeah, and so and it wasn't even in wide use amongst outdoorsmen until like the 1990s. Like, it's very
Yeah.
recent that it's been available to the public, in the hardware store. So I kind of get a kick out of it, not out of pride, but when I hear comments or read comments online about, oh, you're not taking a ferro rod, you're doomed. I think to myself, we survived as a species for the last 250,000 years without a ferro rod.
Yep.
Somehow we made fire, right? And and I've gotten comfortable enough with making fire that it was not a big deal to me. But I do want to be able to make a fire as quickly as possible. And so that's why I landed on flint and steel. It's a method that I am very familiar with. I've used it for a long, long time, as well as friction fire. I knew that I could make my first friction fire, even if it took me a while. It's very damp there. It's very humid, and it's very difficult to make a fire from friction in a humid place. But I knew I could
Yeah.
get, I knew I could get the first one, no problem. And if I can get the first fire, then I can get the second, third, and fourth, no problem.
Yeah.
So that next fire mentality that you're talking about is something that I'm already very familiar with, and it's a method that I use a lot. So, in fact, here, you recognize that?
That's awesome.
Still has
That's so good.
still has charcoal in it
Oh, that's
from
awesome.
the Arctic. But yeah, it worked great, and I landed on the belt buckle as being my piece of steel to use because it was right there, obvious. Like, of course I could use my belt buckle, if my belt
Yeah.
buckle was made out of steel. And so I got together with my brother and I said, hey, you've got a furnace. You want to heat treat a piece of steel for me? And uh, in the shape of a belt buckle. but, but
That's
yeah,
that's actually really cool. That I did I don't do the recaps anymore. It's just so time consuming. But I did one of the recaps and I was like, that earned some serious points with me.
oh, thanks.
That yes, that right there. That I've I've never seen. I've used the spine of my knife.
Yeah.
I've used a piece of file. I have a forge. I make this kind of stuff, but I've never thought about a belt buckle.
Well,
It's it's right there always,
it's
you
right
know.
here. I wear
Yeah.
it. I wear it every day.
See that? That's awesome.
Yeah, there it is. So I don't think I'm ever going to take this off. I have so much affection for this inanimate object
Yeah.
that yeah, I'm going to wear it for the rest of my life. And yeah, I've got to thank my brother too publicly because he helped me a lot in preparing for this. He kind of lives vicariously through me with these things, but between the two of us, we've got we've got a lot of talent between the two of us, you know. And he is an excellent brother. Like, he's 10 years older than I am. And so I looked up to him my entire life.
Nice.
But he never was like an uncle or something. You know, he's always, even though he's so much older than me, he's always been my big brother and
Yeah.
and so when he found out I was going on the show, he was like, let me help you do something. I want to be part of this. And so this is one of the things that I came up with. I was like, all right, if you can do this for me, then that's gonna that's gonna help me go a long way. And when he brought it to me, it was kind of there was a surprise about it, and that was the engraving that he put on it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. So do you
Yeah.
recognize that, Mikey? That's the lion scene from the, what's it called? The Choteau Cave in France.
Oh, no way. At first, I was actually sitting here, I was actually thinking that it was like a landscape. But as soon as you said the line, I can see the lines up at the top of it right there. That
Yeah.
is so awesome.
And so when he brought it to me, he had told me, he goes, there's a little surprise that I did for you about that. And he handed it to me and he says, do you know what it is? And I mean, of course I knew what it was.
Yeah,
I'm an amateur anthropologist myself, and I
that's awesome.
I knew what it was right away. And so it's pretty special to me. But
I was sitting here, I was looking at it and I was like, man, that kind of looks like a landscape. I can see it looks kind of like a river coming through it. And I was like, well, maybe, if you knew, about where you were going, maybe he kind of did that. And then when you said the lines, it
yeah.
just it came into focus there for me.
Yeah, and what's that? It's called, is it the Chavot or something? Chavot Cave?
I have a terrible, horrible way of pronouncing things because I'm from the deep south. We pronounce it how it's spelled. So
Yeah, Chauvet, I think
yeah,
something like that. It's French.
yeah,
I've never been able to pronounce it myself. But anyway, that's a very ancient uh, cave that people used to live in and have ceremonies in, and it's painted all up and down the walls of hunting scenes, landscapes, or of mammoths and lions hunting, and it's really really cool. But anyway,
that's awesome. No, if you actually take a minute, because I'm not going to claim that I'm an anthropologist or anything like that. I'm just I like documentaries. Uh, but some of my favorite documentaries are of ancient man and their way of life. Because I still practice some of those skills, and
mm-hmm.
to see these pictures and think that these are stories that these people told of hunting, or at sometimes probably being hunted.
Mm-hmm.
you know it's a truly amazing thing, and they did that. And this art is not like a kindergartner took
No,
finger paint. No,
oh,
this is very detailed artwork. This is
beautiful 3D
yes,
artwork. Yeah.
yes,
And they
it,
use the features of the caves too in the artwork, so that
yeah,
like the hump of a bison might be a natural hump in the rock or something. It's just
yep,
really really cool what they did.
yeah,
They were
it's
people.
amazing.
They were us.
Yes, they just didn't have the technology that we have today. Our minds have changed so little, if any, since then. The size of our brain, the shape of our body has changed so little, if any, since then. They
Right.
were exactly like us
But
just 10,000 years ago.
they weren't fettered by all of the pollution
Yeah,
and junk that we put in our brains today.
yeah, they didn't have the iPhone.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
was their version of YouTube. You know, they told stories. They passed on their knowledge and history through stories.
Right. Well, and on the
Yep.
subject of fire too, you know, they find artifacts going back tens of thousands of years of ancient people with flint and pyrites that they would use exactly the same way that I'm using this steel. This thing might be a little more efficient than that.
Yeah.
The same thing. It's iron and carbon, and that's it.
Oh, I bet that if you took ancient man, if you had an ancient person right beside you right now, uh, not knocking your fire skills because you showed some fire skills, but an ancient person could probably get a fire going faster with two rocks than you could with a lighter. You know,
You were pretty good at it.
they were pretty good at. They had to be. It wasn't a game to them. It wasn't a hobby. This was I'm cold and I'm hungry and I have to be warm and eat. You know,
Right.
yeah, that's awesome. Uh,
Oh, you know what? I'm going to say something here real quick about that,
Go ahead.
about this belt buckle. I have had enough people message me and show interest and ask about this that I've decided I'm going to do a little run on these, and
Nice,
I'm going to sell probably 50 of them or something. It's just going to be a
nice.
little limited run, but I'm going to punch a few of them out, and
49. I'm buying one of them. 49.
perfect.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. So
And
if somebody's listening to this and they want to pick them up, just send me a message.
nice. Are you going to do like a Etsy shop or
Actually, to start out, I think I'm just going to go through my social media
nice?
and
No,
just send me a private message and I'll get one to you.
awesome. All right. I'll put a link to your Facebook too as well if you don't mind. I'll put a
Yeah,
link to your
probably.
Facebook in here too.
Sure.
Awesome. Uh, so once again, kudos. We've seen friction fires on the show, but the level of what I call the next fire mentality, uh, the level of that you've shown on the show was just amazing. So kudos, great job. Uh, Very few people, even I mean, there have been really skilled people on the show, and they have struggled with fires, you
Mhm.
know. And not only did you get a friction fire going, but you also consciously prepared your next 50 fires,
Yeah.
you know. So that's
Yeah.
that's kudos.
Fire was a non-issue for me out there after the first one.
Yeah,
Getting the first friction fire is difficult in a situation like that, but after that first fire, it's downhill from there. And
yeah,
so the reason that I made this was because I needed a container that I could seal and not have humidity get into it. Now it's
it's not
not
a mason jar.
not a mason jar exactly, and so I had to do the best I could to seal it up, so that very little outside air could get in. But even then, I had to store it in a place where it would stay dry, and so I had a big crevice in that cliff. You can see me by my fire. That I had this little fireplace that was
Yeah,
actually that was made by somebody else hundreds of years ago, and that was not the first time somebody camped in that spot. And so that was pretty cool to find.
that's awesome.
And it had a natural chimney that went right up the cliff face there. And so when I wasn't using it, I would tuck that back into the crack in those rocks, and it was completely protected from rain or any moisture. And anytime I needed a fire, I just go in there and retrieve it, throw a spark into it, done. Fire.
Nice. It's crazy that you say that. Got a little history fact for you. Uh, the the colonists during the colonial era, uh, they would build these stone chimneys, or they would build the mud. I can't remember the name of it. Not is it Daub?
Wattle and daub.
Anyways, yeah, they would build that kind of chimney onto the log cabins that they were living in, or they would build stacked stone chimneys. But they would always have a spot, a shelf on the inside of that chimney where they would keep a small bowl, and that small bowl held their salt,
Yeah.
and that fire kept that salt dry.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's yep. People have used that same technique for hundreds of thousands of years. You know,
No, there's
that's awesome.
no drier place than a chimney.
No, no, even in the rain. I mean, even in a good rain, there's no drier place than in the chimney.
Yep.
Yep. Uh, so fire was easy for you.
Very.
Um,
Yep.
yep. It looked like though that, and it wasn't just you, as a few people. Uh, your gill net wasn't producing as well as you had hoped at first.
Yeah, and that was a Jake problem. That wasn't the, that
Okay.
was just that was me trying to figure out where the fish were in that river. It was a very slow moving river. It was kind of a slough that I was
Yeah.
in. And that water was probably only moving maybe a tenth of a mile per hour. And that's not an exact.
Wow. Wow.
So very, very little current. And I
And
didn't want to
featureless.
go and featureless. Yeah. And there's no way to know where the holes are unless you're out in it. And
Yep.
so I had to kind of experiment around. It was very silty water and you couldn't see the bottom. And so I had to move my net around and experiment with it. And it's a slow process because it's not like you just put the net out and then wait 5 minutes and then say, that's now good. I'll move it
Yeah.
somewhere else. We're talking like a day or two that you've got to leave it there.
Yeah.
And so you were talking earlier about the timelines, right?
Yep.
By my own recollection, it was day 10 that I got my first fish. Um, it said day 14 on the thing, I think.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. It did.
okay, so by my memory, it was day 10 that I got the first two fish there. Um, I burned my hand on, I believe it was day 8.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I can remember the chronology of
Yeah.
the.
Yeah.
But
It's not
anyway,
like you have an actual calendar out there writing this stuff
yeah,
down.
I didn't have a day stick or anything that I was carving notches into, so it kind of blurred into things. But
Yeah.
yeah, I burned my hand. My net had been in the water for a few days. Was the day? It was either the day after or the following day after that I caught my first fish. I think it was the day after I burned my hand though. So anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Still had to be really exciting whenever you finally found the spot, as you
oh
called it, the
geez,
spot.
the
Yeah.
spot. I
Yeah.
found the spot. Yep. And I was able to leave it there for quite a long time. I caught a lot of fish. Um, it doesn't show you catching every fish that you catch.
No.
I had food coming out of my ears after that.
No.
And
Yeah. You said that, not to get ahead of it and we'll come back, but you said that you had ate 30 pounds of food,
yeah,
you know, that's a lot of
it,
fish because,
it was a lot of fish. Yeah.
yeah,
And now
I think we got to see you
that
catch
wasn't
five.
processed 30 pounds. That was like calculating how many fish I had caught, estimating how much they weighed.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You don't
so
have a scale. Yeah.
I don't have a scale, but you know what? The thing about it is that several of those fish that I caught were well over 10 pounds. You know, like we're talking closer to maybe 18, like a couple of them.
Wow.
They
Wow.
were,
Those are huge.
yeah. And see, the thing is I'm just a terrible cameraman. And so, you know, I wasn't doing hero
Yeah.
shot fish, right? And
Yeah.
the reason for that is because when I get a fish, I just want to kill it and eat it. And so I wasn't
Yeah.
thinking about like holding up and, you know, doing the whole pose for pose for the camera. But yes, some of those, several of them were at least 36 inches.
Wow.
And yeah, the one that had the burbot inside of it was a monster.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that because the burbot was big. It looked like the burbot was probably half the size, three-quarter the size of the fish that it was in,
Yeah,
you
oh
know?
yeah, the burbot was about 30 inches long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big fish.
I couldn't believe that it just, I mean, I'm dumping it out of the pike's jaws. And I couldn't believe more fish just kept coming
Yeah.
and coming and coming until it flopped out. And I was like, oh my gosh. But
Yeah, that's a monster. And so that, the pike was huge too,
Yeah, and here's the thing about the pike and the burbot. So on camera there, I speculated that the burbot had been caught in the net and the pike came up and ate the burbot and got caught in the net himself. That's not what happened. I examined that burbot afterwards and I showed it on camera. It just didn't make the cut. I I examined the burbot and there on the side of it was a set of jaw marks that went over and under its entire body, right in the middle of the burbot.
Wow.
And so what had happened was that pike grabbed the burbot in the river and shook it, disoriented it, swallowed it whole, and then a few hours later got caught in my net. And I don't know how well you could see it there in the picture, but there was a little bit of decomposition on the burbot's head.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't get to examine it that close, but
yeah, it was
uh,
superficial, but the stomach acid in a fish is extremely corrosive, and it doesn't take long for them to start digesting. And so, by how much uh, deterioration there was on that burbot, I estimated that it was probably just within a couple of hours that it had been in there. So the whole thing was safe to eat, and I
oh
loved it.
yeah,
I relished that fish. That was the only burbot that I caught out there, but I was really hoping the whole time that I would at some point catch one because they're so
did
good
you
to eat.
catch any other than the burbot? Did you catch anything other than pike? It seems like
Oh,
everybody's just pulling these monster pikes out.
yeah, I didn't catch any whitefish. You saw William catch one, but
Yeah,
I didn't catch any there in that spot. And I think it's probably because of how many pike there were. I mean, it was just chock full of pike. And
yeah,
pike they're like the wolves of the river. They eat anything and everything. So, and they're
yeah.
cannibalistic as well. So
That's I went fishing with Isaiah and we weren't catching anything, and I realized why because the gar had our schooling where we were at. The gar were schooling down through there, and so all of the bait fish were gone.
right.
All of the unless you're going to catch a 45-pound catfish that those gar can just not take, you know,
Yeah.
uh, everything else was gone.
Right.
Yeah.
So uh moving on from the net, after I completed my net, I made a hand line as well. This is it. Okay.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's the inner strands of paracord.
Yep. Inner strands of paracord. And this is what was left over from making my net because the net took a
Nice.
lot of paracord to make. And so I spliced together all of the pieces that were left over using a blood knot, which is a really strong knot,
Yeah.
to make a continuous line. I spliced together probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 pieces of line to make this. And then I used this piece of alder, just an alder dowel, as an indicator, strike indicator.
Yeah.
And then from that, I had a leader. This is the actual core of my bootlace that I used out there. I brought it home with me.
No.
And what I did is I separated, I don't know if you can see it on camera there, but it's just like
Like mesh.
filament. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
well, it's just braided together loosely.
I got you.
These fibers. It's very fibrous. And so I
Yeah.
had to separate the fibers out of this braid and make cordage. And so what I ended up doing was making what's called a furled leader, which is like twisted
Yeah.
rope. Okay. And this is Kevlar, super strong stuff. And that's what I made my first leader out of. And I was able to catch about 3 or 4 fish on that before a pike eventually did cut through it. And that's when I went to stainless steel and
Nice.
my treble hook on there. I ended up only losing a single hook out there,
Wow.
um, which is lucky. But
Yeah. I think I lost 4 hooks and never caught a fish.
right,
Yeah. Just kept getting hung on rocks.
sure. Well, this after I made this stainless steel leader, it was no problem after that. When you saw me try to, like, I pulled on my line and the line broke. That
Yeah.
wasn't me actually setting the hook on a pike. I was
Oh, okay.
I had a pike on there already. And as I started to pull him in, another pike, another pike came up and grabbed my indicator. And
Oh,
I
wow.
tried to pop it out of his mouth before he cut my main line.
Yeah.
So when I did that, his teeth cut the leader right underneath the
Oh,
bobber. And so here's this other pike that's hooked on this end, and he's dragging my leader and my bobber around, and I can see my bobber moving all over the river. And that's why I waited out there, because I tried to get the fish that was on the leader as well as my hook and the line. So it kind of skipped over all me wading around chasing this fish out there. It just kind of fast forwarded. And then all of a sudden I'm on the other side of the river in a different place, and you see me reach out real fast and snatch it. That's
yeah.
because I was hoping he was still on, but we used barbless hooks. And so by then
Yeah.
he'd spit it out. He'd gotten off of it, but I didn't know that. And so that's why you see me, do a snatch and grab, trying to get that.
Wow.
Anyway, there's
Hand
always
lining with
a
a,
lot more to what's going on than what you see.
oh, yeah. Hand lining with a barbless hook is hard.
It is.
You have to keep that constant tension on it. And even just the fish swimming towards you,
Mhm.
it can push that hook out,
Right.
So you have to keep that constant tension on it. Just a side note right there. I just want to let everybody know that's tough,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
Uh,
with that little bobber that I made, it actually became kind of an issue, pike, going after that, because as I would start to reel it in,
yeah,
like do a recast or something, oftentimes I'd have a pike come up and grab that thing because it would kind of waddle across the top of the water and look
yeah.
like meat. And so there was another time when a pike did that and broke my line again. And then my bobber's just sitting there. And then pretty soon I see it moving around because a fish came back and grabbed the bait and starts dragging it around. So I really goofed up because I put the camera on it. I wanted to record what I was doing, and my battery died. I was so like involved in what I was doing. It died like halfway through what I was doing, but I actually made a grappling hook and I lassoed it
Oh,
and
wow.
threw it out there and was able to intercept it, hook onto that bobber, and I ended up catching the fish that was on
That's
there
awesome.
with a grappling hook.
That is so awesome.
But you'll never get to see that.
No, me and Isaiah talked about that. How even when I'm doing my YouTube videos, I'll do something and I'm like, was I recording it? Was I recording that? Man, I hope I was recording. Did I change the battery? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, lots of stuff. Lots of stuff.
That's a lot of fish though. See fish we didn't get to see. We didn't get to see that fish. We didn't
Yeah,
get to see
in
a bunch of
fact,
fish.
I ended up catching, it was somewhere between 13 and 16 fish in
Wow.
between days 10 and 20.
Wow. And see, I think we got to see five,
7.
right? Seven. Okay. Seven
Or
fish.
was it? Wait, no, it was 2 in the net, and then okay, yes, you're right, 5.
Five. Okay.
Yeah,
So
2 in the net
five.
and then 3 in the net. Yeah, you didn't even
Yeah.
get to see a single one that I caught on my hand line, but
No.
I caught more fish on my hand line than I did with my net.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome.
I
But
was
yeah,
carrying
I wish we could have saw that.
carrying it all
Uh,
around in my gut by day 20. I was getting pretty sick.
well, there's one safe spot for food, and that's it. Whoop, almost fell. There's one safe spot for food, and that's in your belly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think they showed me kill like 3 grouse,
Mhm.
maybe 4 grouse during my season, but I killed 19 grouse out there.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a major difference, but that's the same with your fish. You only get to see a handful of the fish, and you caught so many more.
That was the only resource I had in my area, really. I had 2 squirrels that I had seen, and I didn't feel like killing them. Um,
Well, if you're catching that many fish, then
I had a beaver, and I didn't kill it when I had the opportunity, And that may be the very reason why I was extracted, because I think if I'd killed that beaver early on, it would have kept my digestive system working.
Yeah.
But I went so long without eating anything while I was getting my net and my hand line ready, um, that just with the berries that I was eating, it wasn't enough to keep my digestive system working.
No, it will shut down. That's a serious thing. I actually think the caption said something about it, that it will prolonged starvation will shut down your digestive system.
Yep.
And that is a serious thing. I went 6 days when I first got there without. I think I might have used the bathroom on day one, but after that, because I had ate the night before, but after that, I went 6 days without using the bathroom. You
Yeah.
know, and all I had to eat in those 6 days was just a few, like the palm of my hand full of cranberries.
Right.
But after that, after I started getting protein and stuff like that, I was if I was doing nothing, if it was a calm day or it wasn't cold or it wasn't, I was trying to use the bathroom. I would make myself consciously go try to use the bathroom. Didn't
Yeah.
matter if you got a little bit, you got something out. You didn't want it to. Yeah, that was something I was really worried about because especially just eating protein
Mm-hmm.
and have very little fats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, there was another issue that compounded the problem, and that was after I started eating a lot of protein, because I was like, geez, I hadn't eaten in 10 days. I was pretty
Yeah.
hungry. So I introduced a lot of fiber into my diet, but I think I introduced too much. And uh, when I got myself sorted out at the hospital after my extraction, my blockage was fiber. It was like all that
Wow.
all that plant matter that I had eaten just
Yeah.
completely plugged me up. So
There's some plants too, because I actually saw a comment on Facebook about you, talking about, well, why didn't he use something? And I was actually going to ask you what you had used to try to sort yourself out there. And somebody said, why didn't he use some kind of plant matter or something to try to regulate itself? And what people don't understand is your body today is not built to digest raw plant material.
raw
It can
plant
digest a little bit.
raw plant material in the Arctic. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So it's very
Yeah,
different than
not
like
salad.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't like going to the produce section at the grocery store. Right.
No.
So your late season, all of the plants are very mature.
And
Okay.
woody.
Woody, they're tough, and you've got to be really careful about that. And there were only like 3 plants that I could eat safely that were fibrous in my area. And I searched for everything. I was
Yeah.
really looking for plantain.
Yeah.
Plantain would have been just what the doctor ordered early on, but then even afterward, it may have helped some like
It
halfway
probably would
through,
have caused more pain.
but it would have caused more problems
Yeah.
the further you go into it. So the plantain seeds, that time of year, they've got this little stem that grows out the top, and they're full of seeds, and you can strip the seeds off of that and eat those, and that really will help move things through. But it's more of something you need to do early on to help regulate, not to solve the problem. So by the time I actually had a major problem, my biggest thing was staying hydrated. And uh, it was only on day 3 or 4 or something like that. I dug a shallow well and had fresh water.
Nice.
I found a little seep and was able to dig into the ground and make a basin where it would fill up constantly with fresh, clean water. And so I didn't have to boil water after like day 3. I was
No.
drinking fresh spring water that was very, very good every day. So hydration was not a problem for me. In fact, I probably got a little overhydrated because I started to get some edema in my legs. Like when you drink too much water, you can really notice it, like when you take your socks off, you'll have indentations from your socks on your legs because of water in your body.
Yeah.
And that's how hydrated I was. There was like excess water in my body. So hydration wasn't a problem. It was just that extended period of starvation and then overcompensation with fibrous.
Yeah.
So,
It's hard to judge that, you know?
oh yeah, and you don't know how your
Yeah.
body's going to react to any of it. But if I could go back, really, the only thing that would have kept me out there was not going so long without eating before I started eating a lot. Like I
Yeah.
should have eased myself back into it and just let myself starve a little bit more. Just make sure my digestive system is working right,
Yeah.
rather than eat
Because you
too.
have to kickstart it again.
Yeah, you got to kickstart it again, and I rushed it. I Rather than eating, one fillet of fish, I'd eat two.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing that just overwhelmed my digestive system.
Yeah. You said that you think getting that beaver early on. Uh, I'm sure that you're talking about the fats in that beaver.
Yeah, the fat and the
There's a
protein, just having food
yeah,
going through your system that's
yeah,
digestible.
yeah.
That
Well,
plant matter
that
really
fat
isn't.
now that fat will help. A lot of people don't understand this, like lard and stuff like that. It actually helps lubricate everything.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, your body just doesn't suck the fat into your body to use it all up. It processes it all the way through, and it helps lubricate everything. You
And
know,
and beaver are fat. They are
fat.
very fatty,
Yeah,
very greasy.
yeah. Uh, and that's a story for another time. So you can render down the lard and all this other cool stuff that you can do with a beaver, but
Lots of
the fat
lots of
really,
lots of shoulda, woulda, couldas, but
yeah, yeah. But at the same time, that happens.
yep.
But it is a good idea, you know, for people to understand how their digestive system works. That it, and especially in starvation, it's hard when all of a sudden you've got this food, and you're like you said, man, I'm hungry. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you just start eating it, and I got sick. I got sick. I ate a whole grouse after I hadn't eaten for 10 days or so. You know, other than just a little ham. It might have been 7 days. Other than just little handfuls of berries, I ate that whole grouse.
Yeah,
I boiled the bones. I drank the broth. I ate everything that I could eat on that bird. I ate it. You
sure.
know,
That whole
and then
bird
all of a
probably only had 700 or 800 calories in it too.
yeah, but my stomach had shrank
Yep.
and everything else. And man, I was getting these pains in my stomach. And then all of a sudden, you know how it is when your mouth starts watering. Yeah, I was throwing up. It was a terrible thing, man.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but that's because I just put too much in too fast.
Yeah.
I was hungry and I was just shoving it in, you know.
Yep.
Yep. Uh, Another thing though, you talked about you burnt your hands before you caught those fish in the net.
Mhm.
So going back to burning your hands, um, that was pretty rough. I mean, right off the bat, you can see the skin was peeled up. You was talking about tingling in your thumbs, wasn't it, or numbness in your thumb?
Yeah.
And uh, so, did the burn get? Did the water get both of your hands?
No, the handle of the pot got this hand, and
Okay.
it just like the insides of my fingers here across there is
Ah,
where, like, on the inside,
yeah.
like 'cause I had my
Right
fingers.
where you would hold your bowstring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that just scorched those fingers. That startled me because that hurt immediately. Like that was like fast pain, right?
Yeah.
And I instinctively just kind of tried to right the pot with this hand, without grabbing a hold of it. And it just all happened really fast. But what ended up happening is water spilled over onto my hand and it burned pretty badly. These two fingers, the top of my hand, and my thumb.
Mm.
And it was boiling water when it hit my hand, so that's pretty
Yeah.
hot stuff. And I immediately it didn't hurt. I didn't feel any pain from it. at all when it happened, but I knew that it happened, and I knew what the, you just have kind of a knee jerk reaction to the situation. I ran down to the creek and threw my hand in, held it in there for a couple of minutes, and then went back to my camera and confessed my stupidity.
uh,
Yeah,
what
it,
did you, what, go ahead.
it it didn't all show. I there were a couple of scenes where it showed the burn, but over the course of a few days, you really got to see just how bad it was, and you never actually got to see that. The only time
Yeah.
that I would see it is when I was changing my bandages, which I would show, but for time constraints, they didn't show that. But I lost a lot of skin off the back of my hand and my fingers. I lost feeling in my index finger, my middle finger, and my thumb. But it's all pretty much back now. I don't
Good.
have, yeah, I don't have long lasting. It's still a little bit numb on the inside of the index finger right now, like
Yeah.
right through here. But it's not terrible, and um, I was able to heal it just fine out there. I would make a solution every night using um, spruce needles. I'd boil them and render them down and make kind of a mild turpentine, because spruce has terpenes in it,
Yeah.
conifers, and that's a good antiseptic. And so I would just wash it every day after I was done doing what I did through the day. Um, you got your hands in fish slime and fish guts, and you got stuff to do out there. You can't just stop, right?
Yeah.
So you got an injury like that, bandage it up as best you can to keep the dirt and grime and stuff out of there, and then change your bandage every day, and you're going to stave infection. But it's something you have to be really vigilant about, because if you do get something in there and you leave it in there just overnight, the infection will spread. Okay, you get bacteria growing on your wounds, and that's what I didn't want to happen. So every day I was cleaning it and putting a new bandage on, and I had to be really conservative with the material that I had out there. I had a very small first aid kit, and so I just made it last as long as I could until I was out.
Yeah.
And by then, it had begun healing enough that I took the bandage off, let the air get it, it scabbed over, and I just went back to work. So
That's something that people haven't realized and haven't talked about too, is that, I mean, it says on there that everybody gets a med kit, you know, but at the same time, you're told if you use all of this, that's all of this.
mm-hmm.
They're not bringing you cotton swabs. They're not coming out there once a day to check on you. If they have to interfere with it, if they have to help you, you're done.
Right.
Yeah. So you get this much of this med kit. After that, you don't get any more. If you have a wound that is too bad to heal up with what you have,
Mm-hmm.
then you need to be pulled.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
and by the time they did my med check, I had taken the bandage off, and I had new skin growing over the wound, and um, I just wore a leather glove for most tasks that I did, just to keep stuff from hitting it and opening up the wounds, because
Yeah.
it was uh, fragile. So, but if anything bumped it or I scraped it across a stick or anything, it would just open it up and start to bleed. So I
Yeah.
just wore a leather glove for most of what I did after that.
Well, that's smart. That keeps it covered, keeps it from getting damaged any farther. What other problems did it cause you out there? I mean, obviously you can't use your hand all that well.
Well, yeah, the reason why I didn't start building my shelter earlier was because of that. It's pretty hard to
Okay.
swing an axe when you've got a big open wound on your hand, and
Yeah.
swinging an axe
That's
one
something a
handed.
lot of people that's something a lot of people wanted to know, is why you didn't start building your shelter
I
sooner.
I actually started it sooner than the show showed.
Yeah.
I started building it at about day 14. I had a spot that I had picked out already. Um, Everybody knows that they come and retrieve the SD cards once in a while and do a little switch out, right? Well, one of the things that they do is like a quick shelter site inspection. Like they just want to know where your shelter, where your permanent shelter is going to be, so that
Yeah.
they can, if they have to come and
Yeah. For
get you,
medical reasons. Yeah.
yeah, they know where to get you. Um, the spot that I had chosen to build my shelter was right there up against the cliff face, where my fire was and where that natural chimney was. I was going to utilize all of that, and I had begun building the foundation for my shelter there, and they didn't approve of the spot, because they were afraid of rock fall. Once water started freezing in the rocks, they were afraid
Yeah.
there was a chance that rock would fall. And they said, well, if you build it a substantial shelter enough that if there's a rock fall, it could take the impact, then you can go ahead and do it. But I got to looking around at that and how much work it was going to take to sustain a 400-pound boulder falling on the shelter. I was like, it's going to be
Yeah.
easy. Move it. So I ended up looking for a new spot, and I ended up just building it maybe 100 yards away from that place.
Yeah.
Wasn't ideal, but it was good enough. And that's when I decided to build the wiki up, because that that type of shelter is very quick to throw up there, and you can keep building on it all winter long. You could keep building on those things, so it's
Yep.
just pile more stuff on. And
Yep.
so I ended up felling, I don't know, maybe 14 or 15 trees for that, and then a couple of really big ones. It didn't show it, but I mean, I chopped down some trees that were about 24 inches across just to get the balance.
Wow.
I needed something to cover the wiki up, and so the trees there are so sparse that I had to fell some pretty big ones to just to get the boughs off of it to cover that wiki up.
Yeah. Uh, he was talking about the rock fall there, and another good point right here is that if you take 150 pounds and you drop it 10 feet, it has the force of 5,000 pounds.
Right.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. And
Like a
so
can,
it's
that's like a
best to,
cannonball going through your house.
yes, it's best to not tempt it, you
Right.
know. So these guys, when they come out and they do that site inspection, they really do. They think about your health, not, hey, let's make it a little bit harder on them. Yeah, this would be a great shelter spot, but I don't. We should make it difficult, make him move over here. No, it's like if you stay here and that rock falls, it's probably going to kill you.
Right.
Let's
They
not
would
do
have,
that.
and they would have let me build my shelter there if I had put in the energy that it would take to build that kind of a
Yes.
shelter, but I didn't want to put that much work into it.
No.
I wanted something quick and easy, so I just decided wiki up it is, no problem.
Yeah. So when you was how much farther away from your fire area there was your wiki up? Because
About 100
we
yards.
can't tell distance.
About
Okay.
100 yards. Yeah.
So
And
you were using your fire as your cook kitchen then?
yeah, I was using the fire as the cook kitchen. I had
Okay.
an open fire in my wiki up, and it did well. It was actually well underway. I'd say I got the shelter probably 80% finished by the time my extraction was done.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, it would have worked just fine.
No.
Not
Talking
as
about
not as well as my first one, but it would have worked fine.
talking about your cook kitchen there and your fireplace. We see that you made a Bilbo Baggins pipe there. Yes, the clay pipe. I'm guessing that you got the clay from the riverbank.
Yeah, there
Uh,
wasn't very much clay in my area at all. There was a layer that was about a half an inch thick, and I just separated the silt and the mud from it, and then scooped it out with my finger and was able to pack it into a ball. And I did that as kind of an experiment. I wanted to see if it was clay I could use for other things. And so um, I didn't want to just throw a ball of clay in the fire. I wanted to make something
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
all right, I'll make a pipe. Why not? My whole camp area was full. It was carpeted with kinnikinnick.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
awesome.
it's right here. I got got it everywhere. I might as well try this stuff out. So yeah, I refined that clay a little bit, and that's a process of making it a kind of a slurry in water, and then separating the water from the clay and the sticks and whatever else might be in that clay until you get something that's usable and that you can roll into a snake and wrap around
Yeah.
your. That's kind of how you know if it's good clay or not. And I refined it enough that I got to that point, and then shaped it into a pipe. And put
How
a
did you
few
make that stem?
the stem, yeah.
Yeah,
So
had a nice little sweep to it.
yeah, I found a single dogwood bush in my area. And dogwood, when it's younger than 2 years, has a pithy center.
Yeah.
And so I found a 2-year-old branch that was the right diameter for what I was looking for. And it was just a small little scrub bush. I mean, this whole bush was about 3 feet across. It was just kind of a tiny, scraggly little thing. But um, I
Is that
cut
the
the
red osier?
what's that? Red
Was
osier.
it red?
Yeah,
Yeah, the red
yeah,
osier. Yeah.
red osier dogwood.
You can
And
smoke that too, just to let you know.
yeah, you can the inner bark, the cambium
Yeah.
layer is what you can smoke on that. Um. Anyway, I took a piece of snare wire and made a tiny little hook on the end of it, and then shoved it up into the pith a little bit at a time. Took me a couple of hours to do this, but I eventually poked it all the way through the pith of that center of
Wow.
that. It took some work, but the way that they used to hollow those out back in the old days is they would put a maggot in there. They'd soak the dogwood in oil or fat, and then put a maggot or a worm or something in, beetle larva in one end, and seal it up, and it would chew its way through. But
Oh, that's awesome.
I didn't have I didn't have beetle larva or time or the fat to waste on something like that. So I just went to work on it with snare wire, and it worked out. Then I just uh, tapered one end kind of like a pencil, and I had shaped the pipe like the entrance way for the stem in the pipe. I tapered it as well to the same taper as the taper on the
No,
stem. I just shoved it in there, wedged it in there tight, and that was it. And that way I could pull it out and clean it when I needed to. Or
that's awesome. That's so cool. See, that's another thing. Talking about stuff that doesn't get shown. Um, I made a pop.
oh, did you?
I actually made two pops. I made a little small pop, and then later on, once I had all my stuff set up, I sat down and carved a pop that was probably about that long.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was a split stem where I split it, hollowed it out, and then used pine pitch to glue it together. And then I took squirrel skin and wrapped that squirrel skin around it and let that tighten up around it too. Man, it was a nice little pop too.
That's cool.
Nowhere near as cool as the Bilbo Baggins pop because it's hard to get that sweep to the stem. And I
Yeah,
mean,
that was natural. That was just the natural shape of the dogwood. I was like, oh,
that,
this is perfect. That's exactly what I was
oh yeah,
looking
that's so awesome.
for.
That is so cool. Whenever I saw that, I said, "Man, that's probably the best pipe I've ever seen." And it was made out there in the bush, you know.
You want to know? You want to know the shame of it all?
But
It's still sitting out there.
oh
Yeah,
man,
I didn't bring it home. I there in my cook area, I had a little ledge that I would set it on at the end of the day, and it's still sitting there.
Wow.
but maybe I'll go back and get it.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I made a bunch of arrows out there. I made a bunch of arrows out there, and I would lose them. I wasn't worried about losing them because I could just make more, but I was always making jokes while I was walking through the woods. I said somebody's going to come out through here and be and start talking about, oh, look, some little kid was out here making arrows. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What I was thinking
Uh,
was that 300 or 400 years from now, some archaeologist is going to find it and think that it's some kind of artifact from
yeah. And be thrilled.
1,000 years ago. Look at this pipe. Where did this come from? It's ceramic. They were
Yeah.
using ceramics up here.
Oh God, that's so awesome. So did you have to, just a personal question, did you have to add any, like, did you have to add anything to that clay to get it to bind really well, or is it just a refining process that made it work?
That's it. So clay is an organic material, and when you refine it down to just pure clay and fire it, it actually on a microscopic level welds together, and you got
Oh
to
no.
fire it around 1,600 degrees or so. It's a very high temperature, and so I stoked the fire, threw it down in the white hot embers. The other thing too is you don't want oxygen to be able to get to it, because if oxygen hits it, it'll burn. But if
Okay.
there's no oxygen present, it'll weld at those temperatures. And so I let it get white hot and then smothered it. Okay, I smothered the whole fire, and that way no oxygen was able to get there. After I smothered the fire with the pipe in it, I let it sit for, probably a half a day at least, to just let the temperature drop before I exposed it to air again. And then I dug it out of there and was able to handle it, and it was perfect. It was,
So it's like annealing metal,
yeah, it's like annealing metal. I mean, it's just like when you're, yeah,
except for metal
very,
gets
very,
soft and that gets hard.
yeah. You know what it's like? It's like welding a billet of steel. So if you've ever done any
Okay.
blacksmithing,
Yeah.
and you heat up layers of steel in a forge, and then you take it over to the anvil while it's white hot, and you hammer the pieces together, those fibers that are in the steel mix together to where there's no layer between the
Yeah.
two pieces of steel. They're welded together molecularly. And you're doing the same thing with clay. Molecularly, there's no more space between the fibers of the clay, and it all just kind of welds and sticks together.
That's
um
awesome.
so that's what I had to do. It worked.
Yeah. Uh, so on top of your, moving on to something else, because I just remembered it, on top of the wounds to your hand, you had another injury out there. You
Yep.
you injured your tailbone, right?
Yeah, broke it.
Broke your tailbone, man. That is rough.
Yeah.
Uh, so what happened? What happened leading up to? I mean, what happened when you broke your tailbone?
Okay, so the big boulder that I sit on that's right next to my fireplace, it was covered in moss. And I had been sitting on it, and I noticed that there was like a little sharp point under the moss that I would just avoid, because I
Yeah.
didn't want it sticking in my butt cheek, and so I would just kind of shift over to the side. Well, one day, it was probably day 4 or 5. I mean, it was pretty early on.
Wow.
Um, yeah, somewhere around there. I think it happened a day or two before I burned my hand. But as
Wow.
time went on, it got gradually worse. Like, just the pain just got worse and worse, because it was like I was re-breaking it every day. And anyway, what happened was I came at the end of the day and just plopped down on that rock, and that sharp piece of that rock, like, here's my tailbone, it just nailed that sharp
Oh,
corner on that rock, and my tailbone snapped when all my weight came down on it.
yeah.
And it was
Oh
just
my God.
literally in the wrong place. You know? but
Oh. And
but it
that's a break that never really heals.
it it doesn't bother me too much now, but it's only been a couple of months that it hasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
for a long time it was bothering me, but
Yeah.
it was just one of those
Man.
things that you shut off, turn it off in your brain and ignore it, and once in a
Yeah.
while wince from pain, but I wasn't
Still,
having
that's a rough start there, buddy.
one hit
It
after the
threw
next, right?
threw it
You
all
know,
at you, huh?
it's not about what hits you, it's about how you handle it after you get hit. And
That's right.
so
Roll or fall.
you can take pain, you can take discomfort, you can take hunger, you can take all of these things, you can even pile them all on top of each other. But it's what you do with it up there that matters. And
Yep.
I had to sort through all that every day because in the middle of the night when you roll over and a sharp pain goes through your body and all of a sudden you're wide awake and it takes you 3 hours to fall asleep again, that all wears on you. But what I did every day was reset my clock through meditation every morning. And that's what I had to do. And in the end, the thing that got me was completely out of my control.
Yeah.
So,
It usually is though.
yeah.
Yeah. Unless I personally, I chose to leave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was my choice. Uh, at that point, it wasn't even that I was really worried about them pulling me. You know, I don't think that they were going to. You know, it was just my mind had had enough at that point.
Mm-hmm.
My body had been through it, but my mind had had enough. If that makes any sense to you, that there's only a certain point, and when I saw that I couldn't see light through my toes anymore, my feet were so swelled up, it's like my mind just snapped.
Yeah.
And that was it for me. Couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And
So when
so I don't know. You weren't willing to quit. You didn't want to quit.
no,
Like
I
you
would
said, it
have,
was out of your control.
yeah. Um, because of where I put myself mentally, I took the option off the table. And going into it, it was like I had brainwashed myself to the point where there was not an option to tap out. Okay. If that
Yeah.
makes sense, it's just because of the exercises that I put myself in going into it. So after, after I had gotten really sick and I knew that it was a serious thing, like I was within a few days of sepsis. I'd already had a fever, and so I knew it was really close, like super, super close. And the thing that pulled me out of it was thinking about the impact that it would have on other people. And that's what made me be able to snap out of the mentality and say, okay, now, don't be stupid. Like, we're going to live through
Yeah.
this. And that's why I decided to tell production about it. Because I was really thinking about just holding my composure, gritting my teeth. No, everything's fine. No problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that would not have set well with me because, for one, it's dishonest. I was not in good shape in my guts. And so there was a moment of um, character, really, where it it was not something that I should do at any cost, right?
Yeah.
And so it was the thought of that, all of those things together that kind of made me come back to reality.
And another thing for the people watching and people thinking about being on the show or just life in general, don't take your health lightly.
Sure.
There's people that love you. There's people that rely on you. You
Mhm.
know, don't take your health lightly. When you're out there, you're thinking, I don't want to go. My med checks, I don't want to go. I'm perfectly fine. You
Right.
know, that's great. Give them all a high five and send them on their way. Uh, but the worst thing that you could do is lie to them, really.
Oh yeah.
No, no, I don't feel any pain. No, I'm fine. No, because before you know it, you have done irreversible damage to your body. And now you have to go through surgeries and rehabilitations and all this stuff. They don't want that for you. They want you to make it through it, do your best. Stuff happens,
Right.
you know. Don't lie to them about it because it can cause you more harm than good.
Right.
What's the point
There's
in $500,000 if you've got to spend $450,000 on surgeries?
medical bills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, okay, so here's something else that I haven't disclosed. This is your first time
Oh, this
anybody's hearing about it.
all new.
Right on Mikey's channel here. Um, when you saw me wade out into the river to get my line, that water was in the 30s. It was really, really cold. And the
It
mud,
hurt it kind of taking your breath.
oh yeah, and the mud was um like it was like semi-frozen concrete, and I'm out there in my bare feet in it. After that, I had lost feeling in my left foot, and I couldn't figure out why.
Wow.
And I never made the connection for, well, it was for a few days that I didn't make the connection until I was like, oh my gosh, I caused nerve damage from the cold. It was mild frostbite that I actually got in my left foot. It killed the nerve
Wow.
in my toes. And still to this day, those nerve endings haven't healed. And so I've got a lot of numbness in that. So it was the burned hand, the broken tailbone, right?
Yeah.
Nerve damage in my foot from the river. Um, and then you pile on top of that my digestive system shutting down. It was quite a lot to go through in 21 days,
Yeah.
but I didn't have a problem telling production about any of those things. I knew that none of those things were going to get me pulled out of the field.
Yeah.
But what was going on in my intestines, I knew that there was a chance. So I told them knowing that it was a possibility that they would pull me out, but I was still hoping that they wouldn't. And I had decided that if they don't pull me out from it, I'm going to give myself 4 days. And if I can get myself sorted out, because I had already started working on a bushcraft enema. And
I laugh, but it's not funny, but I laugh. But
yeah, but I
you
mean,
got to do something.
yeah, right. And I came up with the design and everything. How I was going to do all this. It was going to take a bit of time to make it work, but it would have worked. But I don't think that me telling them that I wanted to do that was enough,
Yeah.
that to leave me out there. And so um I that's why I asked for 4 days, was because I still wanted to sort it out.
Yeah.
But once I got to the hospital and they took the x-rays and they figured out what was going on, I don't know if I could have out there. And if I hadn't have disclosed that, there's a very high chance that I would have died from sepsis.
Yeah. Or been in an extreme, like you'd have been in the ICU if they would have found you in time.
There was no ICU.
Ah, too
See,
far.
we were 30 hours away from a hospital that could have treated me for that.
Wow.
So
And
yeah,
see, that's
30 hours is
that.
enough to
Yeah.
die from sepsis.
That's the point that I'm trying to get across to people, especially these people online who say, of course, they're not there, so they can say whatever they want to, but they're not there. But they say, oh, well, I would just toughed it out. No, you would have died.
Right.
You would have sat there and died.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Dusty said it best. He got gagged a little bit, and he said, if you got choked, that's it for you. You know, they're not going to make it in time. Even if you press the button, they're not going to make it in time.
Right. Yeah. It's
They're
45 minutes for him to get there.
Yeah, people are that far away from you, and just think they have to get 45 minutes to you, and then get you 45 minutes back, and then 30 hours to the nearest hospital. So you're
Right.
looking at 31 and a half hours that,
Right.
you're dying.
I think that enough people know about the steps that we go through before we go out there. Part of that is a psych evaluation.
Yeah,
And people comment a lot about that because they see people break down from isolation and tap out. And, there's criticism online that people say, well, don't they vet these people psychologically? Well, look, dude,
yeah,
how are you going to test that? Are you going to throw somebody in the box for 3 weeks and see how they handle it? That is the place where you figure stuff like that out, right? How
yeah.
much can you take, right? So I think that these psych evaluations are extremely useful for production in being able to tell whether or not somebody is going to be able to handle themselves responsibly. Where if
That's
they,
what it's about.
that's what it's about. It's not
Yeah,
about
it's not.
how long is it going to take for this person to break down. That's completely asinine.
Yeah,
It's how are they going to handle it when they do start to break down?
yeah,
And are they going to take themselves seriously, their lives seriously? Are they going to be able to make decisions about their own health and when they should call enough?
yeah,
I strongly believe that. And so, I made the decision that I'd rather, this was the place that I was in. I'd rather die than tap out. Right. But that was a tactic. That was my motivation or my state of mind to be able to take any amount of pain that I needed to. But I always retained the cognitive ability to change my mind and tap out
yeah,
when I needed to,
yeah,
if I needed to.
yeah.
So anyway,
And you're talking about the psychological breakdowns and stuff like that. I would, I'd put every bit of money in my wallet down on a table right now to say that even the people that you haven't seen have Roland had a psychological breakdown out there. You
of
might not have
course,
saw it on camera. You might
right?
not have saw it on camera, but at some point in time, that man shed a tear, you know, because that's what happens to you out there. You're in isolation, especially if you carry any baggage in with you, which
Oh,
is
anything you're
hard
carrying
not to do.
inside of you comes out. I mean,
Yeah,
it doesn't take long either, like a week, and
yeah,
you're thinking
in
about
your own
everything
head.
in your head.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. And
And
little
there's nothing
scenarios.
to distract you from it.
No. And the crazy thing is the little scenarios that really don't mean much in the modern day. It was October when I was out there. Here in October, it's 60 degrees. It's not cold. There in October, I was freezing, but I was so worried that my family, I was worried about them being warm. You know, I was like, I hope the fire's going good. I hope there's enough wood. I hope they're warm. They were over here with fans on and the air conditioner because they're sweating. And I was just so worried about that. And little things like that eat at you. Any kind of skeleton that's in your closet, it's gonna eventually pop out. Doesn't matter. And like you said, it doesn't. It really doesn't take long.
Right.
Uh, yep.
And
Everybody got to see me cry on national TV, but that wasn't the first time. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Uh, it's just if people decide to film it or not, I guess. But I guarantee you, everybody out there has had a psychological break at one point or another.
absolutely.
Uh,
That's
Yep.
the beauty of this show to me is that this isn't this isn't a show about, I mean, it is a show about survival, right? The backdrop is survival.
Yeah.
That's the backdrop of this show. But this show is about the human condition and isolation, and that as a psychological study and of observation of what does somebody go through when they are completely alone and
Yes.
they nobody to rely on but themselves. And what
And
better
willing to stay.
and willing to stay, and what
Yeah.
better environment to do that than the remote wilderness, because that's
Yep.
really the only place that you can do that. And
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by it.
Another thing too is let's put it against some. I've never been to prison, but let's put it against some isolation in prison. Okay, when you were in solitary confinement in prison, you're by yourself, but I'm sure they probably give you books.
Mhm.
I'm sure that you probably get fed 2 or 3 times a day, and I'm sure that you probably have a bed and a toilet and a sink, you
Right.
know. Out there, what you have is rain and wind and
Oh,
no food, and you're cold and you're laying on a rock. You know what I'm saying? All of these things that suck comfort out of you, you
mhm.
know. And once there's no comfort, there's nothing to guard your mind with, and so then it just starts eating at you. You
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And
it's crazy.
it's a very individual thing too. Like when you get out there, there's nobody but you, and you're not comparing yourself to anybody else. You're not thinking about past contestants or what somebody else is doing. You're only thinking about what you have to do right then
Yep,
and there. You don't have time or energy to think about other contestants or anything like that. It's just you go until you can't go anymore.
yep. Mm. It's it's crazy. Uh, you was talking about in the beginning about base camp and how all these people are so awesome. You all become friends, and I've talked with everybody about it. It's you're by yourself. Everybody shares this same experience. You're by yourself. It's a little different for everybody, granted, but you all share this same experience, and you're not thinking about past contestants or anything like that. Uh, Anyways, what I'm trying to get at is there's a knowledge shared between all of these people. They're not there to compete against you.
Right.
You know, they're there. It's you.
Mhm.
These people are more than willing. If you didn't know something, or if somebody didn't know something that you knew, you were more than willing to tell them that, or they were more than willing to tell you. They're going to help you out because it's not a competition between peers. It's a competition of yourself.
Right.
How long can I handle this?
Mhm.
Yeah, can I handle it longer than the next guy? If I do, that's great. But how long can I handle it?
Right.
Yeah. Or with the mindset and everything that you had, if the medical reasons hadn't have been there, I believe you would have went really far.
I think
Just watching, yeah, just watching the ingenuity that you were showing, and that was before I even knew about the fish, all the different fish and stuff. Because I was already thinking, your hand's going to heal up in about a week or so to where you can use your bow. I expected to see some hunting, so on and so forth. Uh, Sadly, we didn't get to see that, and that's terrible. But
yeah, it did happen though. I mean, I was still going to the top of my rock and scouring the area. I could see my entire area from that high
that's
rock.
awesome.
And so I would go up there and sit every day, and a good portion of the day I would sit and watch and just look for movement. And there wasn't a lot of area. It was a really tough area because it was kind of a boxed canyon that I was in. You saw
Ah,
that little peninsula that I was on.
yeah,
Well, the side of the river was my border on that side. And then behind me, it was about, I'd say, a quarter of a mile of tundra that came to a sheer 20-foot cliff down into
wow,
a lake that was completely lined with cliffs. And so there
wow,
was no corridor for big game to even move through my area. So what I was hoping for was that there would be more movement after the freeze up, and that those rivers would start to be used as corridors, kind of a highway system for
yeah,
bigger like moose. And so that's what I was going to have to rely on, because there was just no moose movement through my area at all. And so, yeah, but that's the luck of the draw. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
complain at all about my area, because I think if I had gone to anyone else's area, I wouldn't have been able to get my fires.
You don't think so?
Nobody else had quartz on their area. I had one,
Nice. I was going to
one,
ask you about the silica stones.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the place is covered in decomposed quartz, but it just
Yeah.
crumbles in your hands. It's like chalk,
Yeah.
and it's no good. But in the mud on the riverbank, I found a single cobble of quartzite. It was about the size of an egg. Looked like a golden egg sticking up out of the mud. It's like, oh my gosh, I found one. It was like day two that I found it. And so, yeah, that's what I was able to get my spark from. So
Nice.
I wouldn't trade my area because of that. I took a big risk because of that, being able to
Yeah.
find uh, a piece of quartzite up there. That was a gamble that I took, and luckily it paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. That you was talking about the decomposed quartzite. Uh, it's kind of like heat treated glass. It breaks away in these little bitty pieces.
Yeah,
Because we had some of that. You know how if you was to break a car windshield, it's like little square pieces.
that's
It's not
exactly
big
right.
shards. Yeah, yeah.
Really
Because we had
soft,
some of that on our side. Yes.
very soft.
Yeah.
There's would not throw a spark at all.
No. Uh. So back to let's talk about the problems that you were having, the constipation and stuff, if you don't mind. Um. Around what day did you start feeling that pain? I know you said it was 12 days that you hadn't used the bathroom, but of course, that's not going to be 12 solid days of pain.
No, and by the time that the med check happened, it was more like
Yeah.
14 or 15. But I started to feel it pretty bad about day 17, 16 or 17. It was when it started to get pretty uncomfortable. And then it just
Yeah.
got progressively worse every day. By day 18, I stopped eating altogether. And so I
Mm.
did, and I had plenty of food, but I didn't eat on days 18, 19, 20, or 21 because um, I didn't want to be packing any more in my gut.
So it was a new, better kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So I wanted to make sure I had a bowel movement before I ate another meal. But
Yeah. That's smart.
then it was day 19, I think it was that night. No, it was day 20. In the evening, I developed a fever, and and that broke in the middle of the night, and I woke up just drenched in sweat. Um, but I'd been shaking and some slight hallucinations, and it wasn't good. My temperature was probably pretty high. Um,
Yeah.
I've had fevers enough to know how my mind reacts when I have a fever, and there's a point where I start to hallucinate. It's around 100 and 103, where my mind just kind of goes wonky, and that happened that night, and so I knew it was pretty bad. And then, but it did break. Um, Drenched my sleeping bag with sweat, of course, and laid there chilling for a while. But it felt good. Felt pretty
Yeah.
good.
I bet.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a certain point with a fever too, even though it breaks,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not if the cause of that fever isn't taken care of, it's not going to go away. It's going to come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was the thing. I think my body just knew that there was something majorly wrong down there, and it started throwing
Yeah.
everything. And and then yeah, I started feeling chills, and like how a fever starts setting in and your body starts shivering and you're like, man, why do I feel so cold? I can't get warm. And then you start feeling kind of sick, and
Yeah.
then before you know it, you're just like shaking all over, and you feel cold all the time, and then when it breaks, it's like you just feel hot and you're sweating everywhere. And yeah,
Yep. So,
kind of kind of miserable to do when you're in the Arctic under sleeping under some pine boughs,
in 30-degree weather.
30-degree weather, snowing
Yeah.
outside. Yeah,
Yeah.
it snowed that night.
Uh, what was the recovery process like?
So,
Did you go straight to base camp and they treat you
oh,
there? Did you have to
no,
go
they
to a
took me
hospital?
straight to the hospital. So that
Wow.
was, yeah, there was no time for messing around. So they took me straight to the hospital. I had an escort. Um, she was kind of, I called her my rent a friend. She was there for me anytime I needed anything, and was there for emotional support and everything. So
Yeah.
it was fantastic. Shout out to Esri. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, had X-rays, blood tests, figuring out if I was leaking bacteria into my blood and all that. And once they determined that that wasn't um, what was happening, that I hadn't gone septic yet, um, that's when that's when they went at me from both directions and got me rotor rooted and cleaned out and
Nice.
back through into recovery. And it took me about a week to recover.
Okay.
But
So
I was only around the hospital for about 2 days.
nice. So did you go back to base camp or did you have a motel room or
Oh, yep, I went back to base camp, and after the hospital, I went back to base camp. Um,
okay.
and that's when they put me on the refeeding program. I wasn't able to eat anything at the hospital.
Yeah,
They
for
gave me
obvious reason.
a nurse did bring me a little bit of, like, just a little bit of apple juice, which
That's
was
sweet.
great. It was really fantastic. Um, and then, yeah, I went back to base camp. They put me on a refeeding program, got my digestive system working again. It was a really slow reintroduction to food, to normal food. Um, and then, yeah, after about 4 or 5 days, I was starting to feel somewhat normal again, in my digestive system. But it was a solid week, I'd say, before I was feeling like I could go for a long walk.
Okay. Was there anybody else there at base camp with you? Any of the other contestants that
Yeah,
had came out before you?
but I can't tell you who.
Oh, I mean, like was because we've already seen Michaela
Yeah, when I got
had
back to
got out.
Michaela was still in camp. Hmm.
Okay, that's what I was wondering if she was still there. It's always great to have that. From what I hear, I didn't see any of the other contestants until my last day there, my last 24 hours there. Wyatt came out.
Right.
So for my first week, or so, it was just me by myself. I had, other than the production crew, which are awesome, I didn't have any of the other contestants that could share those stories with me, anything like that. So, but from what I understand, coming out and having one of the other contestants there is kind of a blessing.
Yeah, it was. And in fact, I didn't know if anybody was in
Yeah.
camp. And they put us in these little,
Minor tents.
yeah, they're like little
Yeah.
Quonset huts, and
Yeah.
um they're just like a plywood bedroom,
Yeah.
the table and a cot. But anyway, I was stuck in there for a couple of days, and then they said, "Hey, there's somebody here that wants to see you." And I got a knock on the door, and it was Michaela, and she gave me a big hug, and
That's
we
awesome.
we hung out for the rest of the time and talking about a little bit about the experience, and just it was just a nice reunion. And she's got such a big heart, and
Yeah.
kind of became like my little sister, and we still talk all the time. And in fact,
Awesome.
all of us talk every day.
I'll actually be talking to Michaela in a couple of days. There's been kind of a gap between our conversations, so
Yeah.
it's been kind of hard to get everything timed out. But I'll be talking to her in just a couple of days. I
Mhm.
was going to do hers before yours, but it all happens like this, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, everything you're doing great now.
Yeah.
Everything you there's no other than the numbness in your toes. There's nothing's going on with you. That's
Not at
good.
all.
I'm glad
No.
to hear that. And that's just me personally wondering about your health, you know.
Sure.
Uh
Yeah.
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 Um
Tip top. Ready to go again.
that's right. I was gonna ask you, would you do it again?
I'd leave tomorrow if they'd let me.
That's awesome. That's so great.
In fact, on the boat ride back, Raph says, "So, Jake, would you ever do this again?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd go back out there tomorrow if you'd let me."
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's, I think about that every day, that how much I would like to do that again.
Here's something I haven't asked anybody else. Uh you say you'd do it again. Would doing it again be about the money or about
No,
the experience?
no, it would be about unfinished business.
That's exactly right. Closure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's crazy that you can say something like that over, you know, being in a survival situation out in the woods, you know, but there really is a point where you need that closure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I get it. Trust me, I get it. And like I said, it's got to be different. It's got to be different for you than it is for me. Uh, I would like to have that closure.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong. I would still love to have $500,000. That would be great. But at the same time, I know I just got I didn't use my spot to its fullest advantages, and I know that I'm better than what I shown.
yeah,
You know, uh, so I would love to do it again to show that I'm not just some dummy from Georgia. I know what I'm doing, and I could do it. You know,
yeah,
uh, at the same time, I'd love that money, but
yeah,
it's that closure. You
yeah.
know,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's
and it's got to be different for you because you didn't choose to leave; they made you leave. You know,
that I wasn't bitter about it, but I was angry about the situation.
yeah, of
I
course,
I didn't blame anybody. They made the right call. I mean, I was almost dead.
yeah,
They made the right call.
yeah,
But I'll tell you this, Mikey, I became an expert on the digestive system.
that's exactly right.
Like seriously, I got home and I just started studying everything I could about, all right, given the situation, what are all the options that I could have taken? What could I have done differently? I mean, man, I've got I've got pretty good skills and problem solving abilities and um, ingenuity and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah,
But man, I go over all of the mistakes that I made or in my mind that are mistakes, and I felt like I had failed at my task, and all of those feelings, like what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? What am I going to do differently if I ever get the chance again? And so I mean, I went through everything with a fine tooth comb, nitpicking every action that I made out there, isolating the mistakes that I made rushing and being careless and
yeah,
eating food, not eating food, all of these things. Holy cow. A second chance at it would look completely different.
yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. You're saying that you went over all of this stuff. That's kind of like planning a conversation with somebody. Everybody's done it. You know that you're about to get in an argument with somebody, or you're trying to figure out how this interview is going to go, or something, and you're planning this conversation in your mind. that other person doesn't know that plan, you know. So whenever you start talking, it's completely different than what you thought, which is
Right.
completely different. So even though there's a bunch of planning now, don't get me wrong, planning about the signs and symptoms and ways to counteract what's going on with your body is
Yeah.
one thing. But planning the mistakes that you made out there, trying to plan against those in a completely different area, in completely different climate, there's no way that anybody could do that. To me,
Right.
there's no way that anybody could do that, you know.
Right. Well,
Uh yeah,
and throw on
if you
top of
slip,
that a week of hunger on top of that, you know,
yeah,
and just your bodily movements, like how you move, how you think about what you're doing. I mean, all of that is
yep,
changed. You're almost a zombie at that point.
yep,
So yeah, it's difficult.
yeah. But given the chance to do it again, I think that I honestly believe that you would do an amazing job if it wouldn't have been for the situation, the circumstances that were handed to you. I think you would have went a lot farther. You impressed me in a lot of different ways, and I'm not the most expertiest expert that's ever done anything, but I see people build friction fires. I see people do this, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a friction fire. You know, I've seen that. But the things that you did out there, you built the friction fire, but not only did you have that fire, you weren't like, I've got to go spend the next 4 days cutting wood to keep this thing burning for 4 days. Instead, you said, hey, I got some punk wood here. I'm just going to make some charcoal. And then I'm going to pop this spark up in there. And there you go. There's my next fire. You know, that impressed me. That really did. I said, wow. At first I was thinking, he's gonna be right up there at the top. If he doesn't win, he's going to be right up there at the top, you know. And that was even with Timber getting the moose and all this other stuff. I was like, he's going to be right there. There's no stopping him, you know. Losing your fishing line, that didn't stop you. You made a hand line. Yeah, burning your hands, that didn't stop you. You went straight to fishing, you know. So uh the only thing that got you was the constipation, the circumstances that were handed to you, and that's just the luck of the draw, you know.
Yeah, but if I'm ever in that situation again, I'm going to have some preparation in place to take care of it right away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, I mean, just the knowledge that you gained from that, and it may have been already knowledge that you had, but it just
It
brought it
was like
more into focus, you know.
it was one of
Yeah,
those situations where you don't know how bad it is until you know how bad it is.
that's exactly right. But now I think that if you were given a second chance, I think now if you were like, hey, I haven't pooped in 2 days, I'm going to go ahead and start treating this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and just, I think it would be a good idea too to introduce certain plants into your diet that are natural
yeah.
diuretics just
Beforehand,
beforehand, just as
yeah,
maintenance,
yeah.
I
Oh,
think that I probably would do that.
would you do it before you went out? Would you try to, like, say you have plantain in your yard? Would you try to start eating some of that plantain before you left to try to get your body used to breaking that down?
No, I
No?
wouldn't. Because I wouldn't want my body to get used to it.
You want the shock of it. Nice.
Yep. So I
Nice.
would want there to be a diuretic effect on my body without my body being adjusted to eating plantain normally.
I got you. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. See, I was wondering if that makes a lot of sense. That's awesome.
And then, the other thing too that I was doing I was trying to use was I was drinking Labrador tea like it was water. Um, every night I was drinking you're not supposed to have very much of it because it can cause liver damage. Okay.
Yeah.
But I needed a diuretic. And so I was pumping that stuff like
Yeah.
just trying to get myself flushed out. That was, but nothing would work. It was just way too late. There was nothing that, by the time I realized how far gone I was, there was just nothing I could do.
Yeah. Uh, I saw online. Uh, I'm almost out of time, but I want to go over this with you right quick. I saw online somebody had made a comment about I don't know, I don't remember if it was you or if it was Dusty, but they said why not try drinking the river water to get Giardia to try to flush your system out. And I thought, to me now, that's dumb.
Yeah.
Why would you give yourself another problem on top of the problem that you already have?
Well,
what would you think about that? What do you think about that?
With the situation that I was in, I don't think it would have worked anyway. Even if I got Giardia, I probably would have really messed myself up. Giardia is very dangerous, and if you have Giardia while you're constipated, it's even more dangerous because your body has, if you're that plugged up, you don't have a way to flush uh, those parasites out of your body, and that's what Giardia is. Giardia is a parasite.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And so what would happen is now you're just induced, you're vomiting, you're making yourself dehydrated like crazy. Even if you're holding those fluids in your digestive system, you're dehydrating yourself with Giardia. What you need is hydration when you're constipated. You need
Yeah.
everything, your whole body to be hydrated. And so the only way that is safe to induce an enema is an actual enema rather than trying to make yourself sick and have an internal enema. Ugh,
Yeah.
no.
Well, that's what I thought. Firstly, okay, Giardia is a real thing. Giardia is serious.
And
You
I've had it.
know,
I've had it.
yeah, but it's not something that you're gonna get every time you drink the river water.
No.
It's not like the whole river is just full of this parasite swimming around. It's not something you're going to get every time. So just saying, "Oh, I'm going to go drink some river water and see if that's going to," it's not even. You might not even get it for one. It's a little harder than that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not hard to get, but it's a little bit rarer than just I'm going to sniff the water and now I have Giardia. Uh,
Well, and
at the same time,
our water was full of beaver, so it was probably there's probably a good chance that
yeah,
it was there.
yeah,
I
especially
put
more in the
my
lakes, probably.
Yeah, yeah, and there were lodges up and down the rivers too, and I think that there was probably a pretty damn good chance that there's Giardia just about everywhere there, but I still wouldn't
Yeah,
risk. You're asking for it.
no, that's yeah, if you're sick, if you've got the flu, you don't say, "Let me get a cold too." Yeah, you take care of the flu. You don't try to give yourself something else. But that's something that I saw online, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it, just so that everybody else could understand that you don't want to do that. You
No,
know,
anybody
uh,
that had Giardia wouldn't want to have Giardia.
no, no. I've never had Giardia, and I don't want it.
Yeah,
I've only heard about it and read about it. I don't want it.
yeah.
Like I don't want COVID. You know what I'm saying? I've never had COVID. I don't want it. But
Now there have been
Jake, man,
situations where I purposefully gotten it to get used to the water, to just drinking water in the wild. But it messes you up. I mean,
yeah,
like for a week, you're sick. And so
yeah.
in the situation we were in, there's no way I would want to do that up there.
No, I mean, honestly, I don't want to do it anyways. Yeah. But Jake, man, it's been a really just a pleasure talking to you, and I hate to cut it off, but I've got to go.
Yep.
Uh, but I can't wait to talk again. I'm hoping to try to get all the contestants from season 11 together at the end after everything's said and done
That
to
would be
just
fun.
kind of have like a little video reunion. If that'd be something you're interested in, I'll keep you in the loop for it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jake, man, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we'll see you on the next one, buddy.
All right. Sounds good.